This will come in front, and it might be easy when latecomers can just slip in without disturbing others. Right, if a few of you come to the front row, it might be easy for latecomers to slip in without disturbing too much. Welcome everyone, and we are running a few minutes late. I think not too late by Sri Lankan standards, but still we are running a few minutes late, so hope you kind of start the meeting. I'm really glad to see a full house. Shows the interest as well as the commitment on the issue and on the book. So thank you very much everyone for coming. My name is Gautaman. I am part of the group or loose coalition of individuals from all walks of life, from which includes politicians, civil society people, trade unionists, cultural artists, and many others from the Hill Country Tamil community who have made it a mission to make sure that 2023 is recognized, the 200 years since the widely accepted 200 years since the plantation families were brought formally to work in plantations, to make these 200 years count. So this coalition or this group of people, we are intent to ensure that many events are organized around this, to ensure that it is remembered, it is remembered not only as 200 years, but also is remembered as the long-term struggle of the people who came, and long-term struggles, their aspirations are also recognized. Now, this group kind of loosely terms itself as the Malayakam 200 committee. So you will kind of have see that hashtag going forward through the year. We're trying as far as possible to ensure that many events are coordinated under this. So far we are aware that there are a few book launches which are planned through the year, the first of which is today, and there are some research publications which are currently underway and research conferences which have been planned. We are also aware many cultural events that have been planned. So in addition to kind of exhibition of the history, mobile exhibitions which are going to be taken around the country. So there is going to be a series of activities which we have scheduled or which are being organized. And we understand that the state also belatedly wants to evaluate and recognize the contribution the community has made, or that's what the cabinet paper said, that they want to evaluate. And somewhere it also says that 1/3 contribution by the plantation community, by the Hill Country Tamil community has been made. I don't know how they have exactly arrived at, but nevertheless, it is we appreciate the fact that there is going to be some form of formal recognition by the state. We are also aware that there are many political parties, political formations who have also made it a point to ensure that that this particular moment is noted or marked, not as a celebration. They kind of ensure that it is not a celebration, but to to note it, with due recognition. So today what we have is among the first of such activities. This is perhaps not the first. We did have on the 10th in Portugal. There was an event, and I think for people from here also had participated. And there is another event on the 29th. February has a few events. March has what we think would be a long march from Mannar to Martale, retracing the steps of the first of the groups that were brought in 200 years ago. So among a string of events in that series, what we have today is the launch of a book, and the review of a book written by Rajan Pool and Kirbai Mother Pool. Some of you may have already read it, and it has been out there and available in the bookshops. There was also a launch event in the north, but we thought it is important and very relevant to have the book which deals with the rights or the history just before independence and the post-independent history of the hill country Tamil, very exhaustively, very authoritatively dealt with. So we are really privileged to have the authors here, and I'm also happy that three people from three walks of life, an academic, a policy practitioner and a politician, agreed to review the book. We also invited another legal scholar. Unfortunately, she was unable to make it today. But nevertheless, we do have three people who will deal with the material, and then thereafter Dr. Hool and Kirbai Mother Pool will kind of make remarks as well as respond to some of the comments that may arise. May I now invite Dr. Kalana Senaratna to make his review speech. Kalana holds an LLB and an LLM degrees from University of London and a PhD in International Law from the University of Hong Kong. He is the author of Internal Self-Determination in International Law, History, Theory and Practice. It was published by Cambridge University Press in 2021. He is a senior lecturer at the Department of Law of the University of Pennsylvania, where he teaches public international law, constitutional law and administrative law. Prior to joining the University of Pennsylvania, he worked at the Secretariat for coordinating the peace process and the legal divisions of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. May I invite Dr. Kalana.
Let me begin by thanking the ICS for organizing this event, and also thank you, Dr. for that introduction as well as the invitation to speak a few words today. I consider it a great honor to have been invited to be part of this particular event. Now, when Gautam asked me to talk today, I readily accepted his invitation for two reasons. The first reason is perhaps not the most important reason, but I thought I owed a review of some sort, because some years ago when Kalmar Fallen had been published, I had promised that I would review that book. Elijah very kindly gave me a copy, but like Mahendra Rajapaksa's 30th Amendment, 30 plus, it never came out. So I thought that I should accept this invitation and say something about this wonderful book. The second reason why I thought I should speak is because Dr. Rajan Pool's books have always been quite fascinating. There's fascinating information, historical, there's meticulous research that goes into all of his work. So therefore, an opportunity to read also within this particular time frame was, I think, an invitation that I couldn't resist. So for example, when Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe was recently appointed the president of Sri Lanka some months ago, one of the first things that I frankly did was to go through an old book that Dr. Rajan Pool had written, Sri Lanka, The Arrogance of Power. to see what kind of nasty things that young Ranil Wickrama Singhe had done, the kind of things that he had supported, legitimized many years ago in the 1980s. So likewise, I mean, there's so much that one can learn from his work. But also, I've had a lot of respect for Dr. Rajan Kool for being a serious, scholarly critique of not just the Sri Lankan state, not just the signal-agonist mindset, but also the problems associated with Tamil nationalism. And in an age when being self-critical is considered to be conceding too much to your enemy, what Dr. Kool has done through his work has been quite laudable. So I want to start off by thanking him for all the work that he has done, for all the books that he has written during the past few years. I just thought of two themes that seem to be running through this work as well as many of his other works. The first theme, or first idea that I come across is that it's not a surprising one, not something that is unknown to many of us. The idea is that this problem that we've had in Sri Lanka, that we have, this is the Tamil problem or the minority issue, has a long history. Sri Lanka's inability to address this question of equality and non-discrimination has a very long history. It's not something that started a couple of decades or 3 decades ago. And the reason why I make this obvious point, it seems obvious, is because we are still exposed to this idea that it was only perhaps after the 1970s that things started to go horribly wrong in Sri Lanka. There's a generation which tells us that things were quite okay many years ago, that there was a sense of equality, understanding, mutual respect, all of that was there many years ago, perhaps during the Solburi times, the Solburi Constitution times. And then things started to become seriously problematic, perhaps in the 1970s. Perhaps with the adoption of the first Republican Constitution, or more popularly, what I said is that things started to go wrong in the late 1970s with the adoption of the 78 Constitution. We also told that things became horribly wrong with the executive representation system being adopted, right? And people that I work with, even people like Veeramantri, would sometimes subscribe to that particular view. Things were good many years ago, but things started going wrong later. Now, what the book of this nature does is that it tells you that the problem is far more serious than that. Dr. Kool and Ms. Kool, they take us back to the debates that took place many years ago, even during colonial times, to show that this is a serious problem that we've had for a very long time, and therefore one has to adopt a serious approach if one is to address this issue of inequality. What I've also seen is that, just to get back to that idea of things going wrong only after the 1970s. Now, when you go through the debates about self-determination in Sri Lanka, something that I've been able to do, one realizes that by the 1970s, everything that has to be said for and against self-determination of the Tamil people had been said by the 1970s. Another thing that perhaps we do not remember or do not take note of is that by the 1970s, by 1976, we had formed a separatist conflict in Sri Lanka. The Tamil people by 1976 had come to understand that a separate state was the only option. Right? And I always point this out, even though I'm a supporter of the abolition of the executive presidential system. The point there is that by the 1970s, we developed a fully formed problematic minority issue, and all of that happened at a time when we did not have a presidential system. So the point that Dr. Poole and the authors make in this book, which is that this issue of dealing with minorities or dealing with equality and non-discrimination is a very serious issue. So therefore, there is no grand era that we can go back to and learn lessons from. There are some individuals who come and go, people like Arunachala, whose work is referred to extensively in this book. There are some events, some individuals who might have worked for greater equality amongst the Sinhalese and the Tamils. But there is no wonderful era that we can go back to and sort of celebrate. And that, I think, is a very important message. It's not a message that many would like to hear, but that's something that's quite prominent in his work. The second theme is this absence of allies in the Tamil struggle for equality. And there has been an absence of allies at two levels. Firstly, at the personal political level. Political parties, they were sure as to who the real allies of the Tamil struggle for equality have been. There's also an absence in terms of institutions, like the Supreme Court, for example, and I'll come to that later. And this absence of allies is a theme that runs through very strong in this particular book. And I refer to three sort of instances when this comes out very prominently. The first is the debate about the upcountry Tamil people. Now, we know what happened with the citizenship laws. We know how discriminatory that was. So that's not really new. But what's new and what is really gripping about this book is that Dr. Poole and the authors, they talk about the way in which this discourse was developed during that particular period. How people came to debate this particular issue. So the book shows the hypocritical approach that some of the Sinhalese leaders actually adopted. Right? So what we know generally is that there were these acts, there were these orders that were passed, discriminatory certainly, yes. But what we are exposed to is something far deeper. One thing that we're exposed to is that the Sinhala Mahasabha, for example, supported Indian labor. People like Sirpal Samrakudi were in agreement with the need to get down Indian labor. Right? Mr. Bandaranaike agrees, goes ahead with that particular point, and thinks that certain number of people ought to be brought in. But that's because capitalist class wants to ensure that Indian labor, Indian people come here and work for them. And then the same single Mahasabha and the single nationalist ideology sort of rejects giving citizenship to the very same people that they thought should come and work here. Right? So, considering the Indian people to be Indian coolies, the Sinhalese laborers should not fall to that particular level, right? And that wonderful colonizer sort of debate, the discourse that he generates, right? And I've always wondered, if the Sinhalese had the power to colonize, what kind of things he would have really said about the other. Another interesting facet here is the book refers to many speeches that were made by politicians One is Mologure's bullying speech, as Dr. Gould calls it, about Sinhala self-preservation. He refers to this idea, which is not a new idea actually, which is that the Sinhalese, or the Sinhala community is the elder child in Sri Lanka. The minorities, the Tamil people and the others, are the younger children. Right? And therefore the eldest child should point out what the small ones should do, when they are seen to be going astray. Now this is not something new. This is what Jataka Chinkane has been, pointing out for a very long time, for decades. This is also what someone like Jana Saratera said, right, a few years ago. So what's interesting about the book is that we are exposed to this idea suddenly, that this kind of discourse, this kind of critique of the minorities, this has been a very old thing. And this is not something that starts off with either the Rajapakshas or the Janasaras. This has been the case for a very long time. Another important sort of aspect that is dealt with in this book is this debate about the Solpuri Constitution. Section 29, for example. Now what we know is that Section 29, at least theoretically, was an important sort of part of the Solpuri Constitution. But then Section 29 did not do much for the protection of the minorities. And one interesting thing that I gathered from this book is that when drafting the particular provision, the Sri Lankan legislators and the drafters had left out certain words because Section 29 was actually a cut and paste of Article 5 of the Government of Ireland Act of 1920. But when that cut and pasting was done, certain words were omitted, words that could have had an impact, a serious impact, a positive impact in terms of recognizing the equality of various different peoples in Sri Lanka. And then of course there's also interesting details about the interventions of people like Sir Ivor Jennings. Now I come from Dehradun, and generally Ivor Jennings is much respected, and Professor Suri knows that, much respected person. Of course that he is, I think there's much to be said about his contribution to the development of the university, but we also know that he had a different take about the Bill of Rights. He was not interested or keen about introducing a Bill of Rights to the Constitution. He had his own reasons. He thought that the rule of law might, address that kind of human rights issues in Sri Lanka. But also, the authors show how he was, I think, concerned about some of the decisions that came out from the lower courts in Sri Lanka and how he, along with D.S. Sanaraka, tried to address those issues. Certain judgments which could have been, which could have nullified some of the acts that were introduced or ordinances that were introduced in Sri Lanka. So there's that aspect. Finally, there's also the absence of an institutional line, as I referred to, that's the judiciary. Now, another famous myth in Sri Lanka is that, there was a, this is being recorded, there was a wonderful judiciary, I don't want to be a Raja Ramana, that there was a wonderful judiciary many years ago, which took issues of equality and non-discrimination seriously. But the things became morally wrong, perhaps after Sarathan Silla was appointed. It was the Supreme Court. Another very famous sort of thing. That there was high quality judges, many years ago, but things were, after the 90s, it was just, deeply problematic. But this book, as well as the other books that Dr. Hu has produced, shows a more complex distinction. It shows that, while judges of, many years ago, many decades ago, perhaps would have been quite fluent in English, they were not so sort of fluent when it comes to issues of, equality or challenging the state when that was required. So some of the things that are shown in the book, especially chapters 12, 13, and the postscript in particular. One is the argument that the authors make, which is that the judiciary has for a very long time given importance to the supremacy of parliament, the concept of supremacy of parliament, and the concept of security over equal rights. And that has been shown by various authors, they have come up with a wonderful book about the judicial mind where they make that point very clear. Another argument that is made is that judiciary has ceased to be an institution which talks about fundamental principles of constitutionalism, which is the case even today. You take all the judgments that have been issued about constitutional amendments in particular, and you find extremely poor reasoning that's coming out from the Supreme Court. So those problems are highlighted quite significantly. And then the authors also conclude by saying that the large part of the problem that we have with regard to the minority issue has to be or has to go or falls squarely on judiciary as well. The judiciary cannot, argue that it had nothing to do. That's not the argument that judiciary can make. And this is not just the judiciary in the post-1970s. We're talking about a judiciary that was there in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, right? At a time when it was considered to be of high quality. In conclusion, what do we get? What do we do now after this massive critique? Dr. Rajan Poole, does not give us a very clear sort of policy prescription as the NGOs would do. There is no final sort of things to do and a list that we get from his work, which has been extremely attractive to me personally. One has to find one's way out of this deep mess. But he refers to certain things in his Talmud for the book that he published in 2014. What he says is that we need to stand up for justice uncompromisingly against a culture of lies and injury, particularly amongst ourselves. In this book, one gets the line which says there's a need to be more serious about equity and fair play. Now that's not something that the current generation, the Anagalia kind of generation would look towards, because that does not give you a very clear way of addressing these problems. One needs very clear solutions, there's that revolutionary zeal that is required. that's the kind of thing that's expected by some, not you, but the youth, and I don't belong to that youth category anymore. But I think this is the lesson that we get from Dr. Rajan Poole is that one has to work at it. One needs to work towards equality, perhaps on a daily basis. One gets up in the morning, tomorrow, and one has to take it on afresh and work towards it. There is no easy solution. Had there been a solution, had there been an easy solution, we wouldn't be talking about this issue today, and Dr. Rajan Poole and Poole wouldn't be writing books of this nature. So with that, I want to thank Dr. Rajan Poole and his school for this wonderful book and for this invitation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karan. I'm always, worried and concerned kind of when we talks of some topics and looks at me. But just I think there are 2 points which I really want to draw. One, for all the reasons that Kalata pointed out about the book, is why I think we thought it important or necessary to start off the Malayakam 200 with this book. It questions, or while there is a heavy effort at sanitizing some of the past leaders, and time also does that. It always is important or necessary for us to understand the motivations or the nexus between the political class and the industrial class as to how that shaped these decisions, how and why the workers are where they are, and how and why that solutions that eluded at the turn of independence still eludes us. It's important for that reason. And the second reason, again, as you pointed out, there is no one list of prescriptions. All of us have to contribute, and all of us have to work. And what we think to achieve over the space of 2023 is to ensure that when these conversations are had, that across the communities there is a better understanding, and that we start these conversations at a slightly higher, more informed level. And it is for that reason, I think this book is a huge contribution to what we are currently grappling with. With that, may I now invite Mr. Vamadevan, someone whom I deeply respect, someone who gets things done. He was born in Portugal, had his secondary education at Hatton Highlands. It's important to mention because Hatton Highlands is an institution for us. Had his BA from University of Ceylon, MA from Leeds, and MPhil from JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Was a visiting lecturer at Colombo, Vidyodaya and Vidyalanka University. Was a deputy director at Ministry of Finance and Planning. Was a director Planning Department. Additional Director General Estate Infrastructure and Housing Ministry. Advisor to Minister of Commerce and Industries. And I think lastly was also a member of the National Procurement Commission. Has an illustrious kind of, very stellar civil service career, has grappled with these issues on a day-to-day basis in the sector. So therefore, may I invite Mr. Vamadevan to give his review.
Mr. Gautam and author of the book, and all ministers, Devaraj and Dr. Karan. I was asked to look at this book and to say about this book, and in terms of that book, how the plantation community or the Indian community or the Malayalam, how it looks like. So my presentation will be focused on those 2 things. One about the book and the current status of the plantation community or Indian community. When I looked at this book, 2 books came to my mind. One is the history of the upcountry Tamil, written by Mr. Nadesan, communist and the trade unionist. Another book, The Endless Inequality, written by Yogeshwari Vijayapalan, a lecturer in law and a researcher. The stillborn democracy gives a historical account of the political development centering on the plantation Tamil, which is thematic one, and detailed analysis focusing attention on the laws that were passed by legislative state council and the parliament from 1922 to 1972, which were detrimental to the well-being of the people of Indian Tamil, who represent around 7% of the Sri Lankan population. In that sense, it is different from the other 2 books, which cover a long period and many matters. The clarification is necessary on this percentage, but always now 4.2, actually it is about more than 7%, because many of them have been identify themselves as Sri Lankan. First, we look at the political status of these people. Author starts with the Indian Immigration Act of 1922, passed by the Indian government, which stipulates all immigrants who have lived more than 5 years in a country where they have migrated become the responsibility of the local government. In other words, those Indian labour who have migrated to Sri Lanka in 1820s, if they have lived more than 5 years, they become the concern of the Sri Lankan government and not of the Indian government. This fact was very important. Since the Indian government continuously adopted its negotiation with Sri Lankan government with respect to the political status of the Indian in Sri Lanka, while the Sri Lankan government not willing to consider them as Sri Lankans. When the question of voting rights came up for discussion at the Legislative Council in 1922, the Sri Lankan leaders were very strong in their position that Indians should not be given the voting rights, as they were not living here permanently with dividing interests. The debate at Legislative Council were recorded by the authors in detail. I think the main contribution of this voluminous book is highlighting the speeches made by various political leaders and the lawmaking bodies before and soon after independence. Its main theme was to trace the origin of the anti-Indian feeling and bring out its political and economic impacts on the life of the Indian country. Sinhalese leaders opposed vehemently giving vote rights to the Indians on the basis of literacy, property, and domicile. However, when the colonial government gave universal franchise through Donmo Constitution, it did not exclude the Indian countries. As a result, 3 members were able to be elected to the State Council to the dissatisfaction of the Sinhalese leaders. Hence they brought 2 legislation, namely the registration and immigration laws in 1941 to eliminate or restrict voting rights of Indian countries. The fear that the Sinhalese leaders had was the political strength will be reduced if the Indian Tamils were given voting rights. To this fear, another political development worried the leadership. That is the growth of leftism and its alliance with the plantation Tamil workers. The book cites an incident. In 1940, in January 10th, there was a workers' agitation for a wage increase in Mullaria estate, closer to Hanguranagar in Kali district, where a worker, Govindan, was shot dead. This was organized by the left parties. This signaled the class collaboration between the Tamil plantation workers and the urban Sinhalese workers. The rightist leaders found as a threat to their political hegemony. Due to the Second World War and its development in the local politics, left leaders were taken into custody. Election in 1940 was postponed. Given this background, immediately after the independence, the new parliament passed the Ceylon Citizenship Act of 1949, which defined the citizenship to a citizen but created stateless persons among Indian Tamils. This is why the authors have captioned their book as Stillborn Democracy, Lanka's rejection of equal rights and independence. They conclude their book with a postscript of 1972 Republican Constitution. They critically examined this removal of Section 29 of the Sorbonne Constitution, which was a check on the parliament, and it was considered to be a. The next important act was the Indo-Ceylon Agreement Implementation Act 1967, which attempted to solve the stateless problem. The Sri Mahasastri Pact signed between Sri Lanka and India in 1964 solved the stateless people, numbering about 825,000, leaving 150,000 to be solved in 1974 by Sri Indira Pact. Although in terms of this agreement between India and Sri Lanka, the issue of statelessness was resolved, the implementation posed number of problems. The period fixed was 15 years, but it got dragged for a longer period. When 7 were repatriated, 4 were given Ceylon citizenship. With the escalation of internal war, the ferry services between the two countries came to an end in 1984. Only around 500,000 persons, including the natural increase, were repatriated, leaving the statelessness to continue till 2003, when all the remaining stateless persons were all absorbed as Sri Lankans with an amendment to the Citizenship Act in 2003. On the economic side, another important aspect is the authors highlight is the land ownership issue. Similar to the voting rights of the Indian Tamils, land ownership issue also became a central issue which was used to incite anti-Indian feeling. The authors have highlighted the 1938 Land Development Ordinance, which confined to the land distribution only to the Sri Lankans and excluded the Indian Tamils. The fear was that when the lands were sold to the British companies for the development of plantation in the 1920s, it was claimed that the lands which were due to villagers were given for estate workers. Similar villagers were not willing to work in the estate. Further, when there were labor shortages, government sought assistance from Indian government to relax the ban placed on labor immigration. The estate lands were privately owned by local as well as foreign companies until 1972, when the state took over the lands from private owners and placed them under the Land Reform Commission. Only up to 50 acres of land were left with the private owners. More than 65% of the LRC lands were given to two major state-owned agencies, namely Janta Estate Development Board and the State Plantation Corporation. The lands were distributed to various other agencies, including the villagers under different schemes. In this distribution, estate Tamil workers were by and large excluded. An example often quoted was the National Agricultural Diversification Settlement Authority, called as NAGSA. When the programs were implemented by NAGSA, only lands were given. Not only lands were not given, but also the estate workers were sent or chased out of the estates. After the statization, some authors have referred not nationalization of estate, statization of estate, because the nationalization has a different meaning. Statization of the plantation, land became a sensitive issue. In certain instances, it has led to ethnic violence. The Delta and Dakwai estate, closer to Gampola, have been cited as an example. Plantation workers, even before the independence, have fought for their land rights. In 1946, Nevsbury estate, lands which were used by the workers were taken over by the government for the distribution of the villages. This was protested by the workers with the support of the workers from other estates as well. Later this issue went to the court and was settled. After the statization of the plantation, similar attempts were made. One such was the proposal of taking over 7,000 acres of land in Talwar region in Norelli district, which resulted in the death of a worker called Sivanu Lakshman following the police shooting. Thereafter the attempt was given up. The stateless had an indelible mark in the development process with regard to the Indian community. Due to productive systems in the plantation structure, the plantation community was economically isolated in addition to the political isolation. During the period in the midst of statelessness, there was an increase in the political representation, due to increase in the voters. Firstly, in 1977, there was one elected MP to the parliament, and this number increased to 11 in early 2000. With the increase in the political representation, there were few became cabinet ministers due to political differences. The creation of a separate ministry in 1977 really a milestone in mainstreaming this community. With or less representation in the parliament, they could participate in the development process of the country. It means they were not enjoying the rights, economic or political rights, and or denying the rights. An example may be appropriate here. In 1973, the government announced that year as a production year and promote the local production, banning the imports. at the district level, the district political authority system was established, and the decentralized budget was introduced, and divisional development councils were set up. And to administer and manage these initiatives, planning officers from the from the planning ministry were sent. On my request, I was sent to Norelia. At the first meeting of the political authority, it was decided that the decentralized budget, the allocation of decentralized budget must be only to the villages and not to the estates, because the estates were at a developed stage. When there was only one nominated MP at that time, I had an opportunity of approaching him and told the situation. And he went to see the Minister of Plantation at that time, Dr. Palvinari Silva, and he referred that matter to his secretary, Dr. Dorothy Souza, and he referred that matter to the secretary to the Plantation Ministry, H.A.D. Gunasekara, and he wrote back and said, this matter will be taken up later. That was the end. As a result of non-participation of the government development activities, all social indicators were clearly showed that how the community was lagging behind. The social development of this community was very gradual, along with the increased political representation. Only in 1997, a separate ministry, namely the Estate, Housing, Infrastructure and Community Development, was established, which was a milestone. Government resources were utilized for the construction of houses, provision of electricity, development of access roads, and appointment of teachers, upgrading of taken over schools. Another example also may be appropriate here. In 1999, Ceylon Electricity Board implemented village electrification with the Swedish assistance. I think village V1, 2, 3, like 4 like that. And I was made the director of the Economic Infrastructure Division in the National Planning Department. I saw this was a very anomaly, because at that time the electrification and the plantation was only people have access, only 10% of the people have access to the electricity in the estate, whereas in the rural sector it was 60%. So that something has to be done. Fortunately, the minister was there, the state infrastructure minister, and I met him and explained. Then he made some intervention, and later this was rectified. Later, for the estate sector, a separate program was initiated, and now currently it's about almost same. Almost all are having electricity. However, still there are glaring omissions needs to be mentioned here. Estate health system to be brought under the national government, national system. Although Cabinet decided to take over the estate health facility in 2003, implementation is being dragged due to various reasons. Another example is the postal services. In this country, letters are delivered to the doorstep in all the parts except to the estates. The letters are sent mainly to the estate management. Thereafter, at a later stage only, the letters are delivered to the workers, involving a lot of delay and causing a lot of hardship to the people. There are people I have seen unable to attend some exams, go for interviews, that sort of problem still prevails. Although 300 estate postal PNs were appointed in 2006, still the problems continues. In 1987, Rajya Sabha was established, and the services were not extended to the estate fully. Although estate residents voted or elected their representatives, further there were only one Rajya Sabha for 10,000 voters in other parts of the country. Whereas in Norelia district, there were two Pradesh Sabhas which had more than 200,000 each. Now the anomaly has been resolved to a certain extent. Divisional secretaries' involvement also limited, mostly they rely on estate management. The representation of these people in the public sector at the highest level is very minimal. Currently, there are no ministry secretaries or heads of the department. No one in the Sri Lankan Foreign Service, only 4 in the Sri Lankan Administrative Service, and 3 at the Sri Lankan Planning Service. There is one Supreme Court judge and 3 few other judges. There are only 2 professors at the state universities, 17 universities, and there are only 2 professors are there. So in the education, administrative service and the principal services, there are a number of officers. In terms of institutions in the field of education, a regional university in Novelia, where around 500 students annually get qualified to enter the university, has been a demand put forward by academic, civil and political groups, is still awaiting a positive response. Another development I will give to this. Another development is the change of the name of the State Infrastructure Ministry as Hill Country New Villages Development Ministry, which signifies the transformation of estates into villages. Subsequently, the establishment of Hill Country New Villages Development Authority, which has been legally mandated to develop the newly built housing schemes in the new villages. This process has already been commenced. However, due to change of the government in 2019, that's a setback. We hope that this process will be restarted when there is a stable government is established. In conclusion, I wish to refer to another important milestone which Mr. Gautam referred to marking this 2023 as a 200-year after the arrival of the Indian labor from South India in 1823. They came to work in the plantation as laborers, but over a period they evolved as a community with a separate identity. Now they are considered as a 4th minority ethnic group and demand that they should be considered as Hill Country Tamils and not as Indian Tamils identified so far. Their wish is that the ethnic group should be considered as a separate national minority and migrated and integrated into the mainstream with equal status, enjoying all social, economic, political and cultural rights. Since they have lost or denied several opportunities, some form of affirmative action is necessary to fill the gaps. Then the Sri Lankan democracy will not be a stillborn, classified as stillborn, but will be a complete or a live month. Before ending, I wish to make a request to the authors. This valuable book should be reach the wider section of the population or readers, and abstract should be made in simple language and can be translated into Tamil and similar. With that request, I conclude, and also I thank for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and again, drawing from Mr. Ramadevan's speech as well as the book, a couple of things jump out. One is what could have been, if our leaders had the incentives had been aligned or structured differently. If they had kind of looked beyond their parochial class and at times very company interest. So if what could have been, and just extending that, if only our resolutions or our conversations had integrated resolving the issue of this particular community, then maybe if you resolve, it's like solving if you solve this puzzle, that would kind of ensure that all other pieces also fit into place. If you are able to address the equality or integrate this particular community effectively into the mainstream of Sri Lankan polity, then the state restructure or the state configured taking that into consideration may probably have ensured that other communities or other groups rights and could have also been better integrated. it is not a comment on only the past leaders, right? Even today, even now, when we conceive of national question, it is very much drawn in, very much defined as between, the northern eastern Tamils and the state. How does one kind of, broaden that? Whether that broadening then therefore would help us, find better solutions is something, which we need to grapple with. And the other one is, of course, the stickiness of, the sentiments. The origins of the land development origin, even today, right, whenever one says, why don't we give land to the, plantation workers, or, have someone give them land, right? Immediately, what would happen to the industry? What would happen to the company? Would the tea industry, really fall? What happens to the villagers? Will there be a conflict, So that sentiment, reading, its origins in the land development ordinances and those sentiments, those stickiness of those sentiments still persist, which we need to address. I just would like to, now invite from the plantation community or from the hill country Tamil community, from the Malayalam community, which he probably is the most senior most politician, political leader, thinker, scholar, whom we have. We are really great to have him. He had a very illustrious career, starting off with left politics and then into CWC. Was a senior leader, vice president of CWC. He had been at the ringside seat, or he was within, very active as the community struggled and regained its citizenship. He had, he was working very closely and was part of, many of the negotiations over a long period of time, which then ultimately, ended up us receiving, citizenship or resolving the citizenship issue not too long ago. It took 2003. We didn't resolve it, quickly. Started off, and it took a long time, and he has been a very instrumental part of it. He had been a politician, a state minister, and since leaving the parliament, he has also, established and had a foundation for community transformation, a think tank which had contributed immensely to what the political aspirations should look like. What are the contours of solutions for country Tamils could look like. I now invite Ms. P.P. Devaraj to address us. Thank you.
Dr. Rajan Hood, which is Secretary for the Mr. Gautam, Alan Nasinathan, Mr. Vamandevan, and all of you here. I thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this discussion. I will present my viewpoint both from a practical experience as well as without any formal kind of note or actual detailed facts. It's an exchange of ideas. The book is excellent, I would say. A lot of scholarship has gone into it. A lot of meticulous work is quoted. It's very clear with with Ponnambalam Bhagavatam. When I think of Ponnambalam Bhagavatam, I am reminded of a Tamil dictum which says, whatever you think, whatever your thoughts are, you must be equal to high and lofty. I think he was a symbolic of that thinking. His only thought his thoughts were high. Thoughts of God and enveloped a large picture of people. When he found there was a difference in regard to labor, Indian labor, he boldly pointed it out to Governor Manning, as well as to those who will be controlling the plantations sector, that there is something wrong here, something that is not correct. So he was a great man. And I also would like to share some ideas with you about the period in which he lived, the era in which he lived, and how the country developed. What was the state of the country at that time? After colonial conquest of Portuguese and then later Dutch, many changes had taken place in terms of various cultural features. Even in regard to administration, many changes had taken place. But it is only after British conquest and Gold Cameron Commission that the most profound change took place in Sri Lanka. It was an economic, utter economic big change. The country completely changed from what it was to an entirely new country. When slavery was established, slavery was abolished in 1833, and British, or those who were in power, who were the planted kingdom, planters, were looking for new lands, new areas where they could plant crops and benefits. And they also had to think of new forms of recruiting labor, not slave labor, different forms of recruiting labor. After the Gold Cameron Commission, they found, I do not want to go into detail, they found this suitable area for coffee cultivation. Not that coffee was unknown to Sri Lanka, coffee was already known. And coffee, even small amounts of coffee had been exported. But the fact that the Gold Cameron Commission brought about these administrative reforms, large administrative reforms, reorganized the whole system, gave an opportunity to open up large amounts of land and bring in capital for investment. That is, even Goldberg, I think, himself was also interested in plantations. So when the land opened up, within a short period of time, I have a small note here, how much, between 1838 and 1843, when large-scale coffee started. Within the short time, they exported 500,000 tons of coffee. 500,000 tons of coffee. It was a remarkable, vast change. So it was change, and of course afterwards tea and rubber, all these things came. That the income generated was high, but was something in Britain, and some went to the earning of the governor's administration. But also it filtered down to the people also. It filtered down to the people also. New roads opened up. The villages from school, the school for example, I have made a note here, they were in that, before that Gold Commission, they were only, they went up 24 after the Gold Commission, within 100 years, 20 times the number of students went to schools. School buildings are coming up, and new classes were rising. So the Gold Commission brought about a profound change, and it is in that profound, when people were not only studying here, but also they went to London and to Cambridge and Oxford, and they got their degrees, and they were exposed to liberal ideas of the period. They were exposed to new thinking, new rationalization, new ways of administration. So that is, I think, Kodambaram Arunachalam also was one of that product. So Kodambaram Arunachalam, so many others, so many others, Bandaranaike. Kodambaram Arunachalam was one of those products. And when he was advised by his father, I think, joined the civil service. He joined the civil service, performed extremely well. Extremely well. That at that he was excellent in the work he undertook. In 1901, I think he was the director in charge of the census. It was one of the finest reports that was made. It was all recognized. So I think as a civil servant, as an administrator, he performed his job with par excellence. Par excellence. So when even at that particular point of time, he must have had certain political views and ideas. But later, after he finished with his civil service, he turned to politics. He looked at politics. And in looking at politics, because as I said earlier, his ideas were large, lofty thoughts. So he tried to build organizations with this kind of ideas. He became later the president of the Ceylon National Congress. And he had many friends, colleagues. During all this period, what is most interesting is that what is impressive, or what Mr. Vamadevan were all impressive, his interest in labor, Indian labor. See, nothing wrong here. The Indian labor is you are making 12%, 17% profits from your states. But you are not sharing it with the workers. That is, so I think that irked him. It irked him. And he, together with, he was also president of an organization, the Peri Sundaram was the secretary at that time. Natesariya was one of the pioneer people in this country, the pioneer people who fought for the practice. He was together with Natesariya and T.B. Jaya and all this. So he thought in broad terms, understanding, and also had an eye on this poor suffering labor. I think it is for that, so that I must, focusing attention on that, I think I must really express our thanks to this one. It is labor. Now, of course, as we all know, so many things have changed. It is during that period of elite creation, during the period of Oxford, Cambridge education, during that period when he came, in that period, that was the period. Then of course things changed. 1926, Bandaranaike, what did he say? What was his idea? He said, when somebody asked him, he said that in Sri Lanka, without a kind of federal system, we can have no solution. He had studied in Oxford or Cambridge. He knew the political thinking at that time. So he said, this is what he said. Perhaps, the Bandaranaike, that slightly reflected that idea. So that, but what happened? In the course of events, many things changed. After this rise of new classes, the Bandaranaike changed from his liberal ideas to become the leader of the single-only movement. And he bought the single-only act in 1956. So this whole Book Commission, this entire economic change and the rise of new and different classes, got this rise of the single sentiments, the majority feelings. Bandaranaike found that is a fine field to organize. So we said, not that they were different, but they organized, and the Panchama Balavedi, and then to organize it, and finally brought this country, the very development brought this country to a situation where now there is no retrieval, it seems. It is a situation of no retrieval as it were. Because the whole idea, as we carry on that kind of politics, becomes corrupt, becomes impossible, becomes personal, becomes selfish. So that kind of how between parties, inside parties there are quarrels, inside parties. Between parties there are differences. What is the question that has to be raised? So with that observation, this is now, today we are in that position. But of course, problem of, I have been partly involved in some of the negotiations with these citizenship matters. Or even before, I have been, as you said, a member of the Communist Party. I was a strong, ardent member of the Communist Party. But I remember, after the Bandaranaike change, single political change, there was a big problem inside the communist movement or the left movement. How are we going to deal with this matter? We are isolated to a small class of working class. But about the large population, how are we going to deal with this matter? And slowly, they fell behind the line of Bandaranaike. Slowly, imperceptibly, sometimes very clearly, sometimes even taking the lead in that. So they no longer represented a true Marxist ideology. So I remember in 1964, after Mrs. Bandaranaike signed the Srinivasa Pact, the Communist Party had a resolution. Although I was not a member of the Communist Party, I had the privilege of attending some of their meetings. And before that, 1964, they had a formulation that all people of Indian origin, all state workers, who would want to be citizens of Sri Lanka must make that clear decision and become citizens of Sri Lanka. And others who want to go away to India to find their home there, others should be take the decision and they should go home. But in 1964, they brought a change to that resolution. They said, they altered the thing. They said all those who want to go to India should go. Others who want to remain should remain. This is the change that they brought. So I was there and I was puzzled. They said, why this change? Maybe I could grasp the thing fully. I said, the only person I remember, Sagat Mutrikavagam, he got up and said, we must satisfy fully our associates, our Communist Party members and others, that we are correct, this formulation is correct. But then some others took us aside and now party has decided. You know, party has, what did you say? Party has decided. It is impossible to say. That is how Stalin wrote the such in the party said, party has said. So you see, when the party has said, we could not, they are arguing, as far as we are too small to argue in that. So they went to that. So they went, not only that, in 1972, when British Bananayaka, in 1965, Nayaka came to power. Of course, he was the responsibility of implementing the stream of such impact. And he said, for every 7 persons who registered themselves as citizens of Sri Lanka, 4, according to the proportion, of the time, 4 will be registered as citizens of Sri Lanka. But when Ms. Banana objected, I never said this. Only when 7 are repatriated out of the country, then only we can give for citizenship. There was some dispute. In 1972, she brought immediately cancelled the ceremonies, withdrew the record, and said 7 to 4, other proportion. So I again went to Peter Cameron. I remember meeting Peter Cameron. Said, this is something wrong. I mean, now actually at least functioning. It will become dysfunctional. Then he said, look into that. I think it's a serious matter. That's all. I discussed with other Communist Party leaders. Then in 1972, after that, Mr. Aziz was appointed. I can really was appointed as a she was appointed by Banana as Mrs. Banana. I also told him, no, it's a very serious matter. We have to fight this. But nothing happened. Nothing happened. Then the Tamil United Front was formed of Ceylon, or Ceylon Tamil Congress, the Federal Party, and the CWC. All these 3 parties combined, and they said the policies that are being pursued by Mr. Bananayaka is unacceptable. It's detrimental to the minorities. We must oppose this. So therefore, I think that these 3 parties came together to make this position. But in 1976, I think, the Federal Party decided that we focus on a state. So then the CWC could no longer remain within that coalition. At that time, I also was involved in that. I can personally say that. We had contact with the UNP. And there was an invitation to participate in the Atthanagar Satyagraha. I was one of those people who ardently supported it. Yes, you must participate in Atthanagar Satyagraha. Because this, to see Mr. Bananayaka's policies in the constitution that she drawing on. So I think Mr. Tandamani and Mr. Sami, I think, they participated in the Satyagraha. Had some small difficulties, but that was nothing. Then we went to meet after that, after elections, the Indian workers. And after that, I remember he had some kind of attachment with me, so I used to prepare very much for him. So he invited me to go to see Jayalaya. I went to workplace, his house. So we sat down and he used to serve tea personally. He sat down and he said, Sonda, what can I do for you? This is the very question he asked. We had already discussed on the way what we should do. We can ask him only what he can do. If you ask something beyond that, if you solve the citizenship problem, that would be impossible. So we said, why don't you bring the Dalisena implementation back, which we withdrew, but cancelled. Then he asked me what it is. I explained to him, this is exactly what it is. But he remembered also, I can do that for you. So, Naman, I can do that for you. Within 3 weeks he will do that. That was the beginning. Then later that led to other discussions. The 94,000 were not applied. Now they were able to get citizenship. Then it went further. Of course I would say Chandrika Kumar from the later on, she was also very sympathetic and she helped us resolve the problem. It was not like her mother, she helped to solve. So you see, politics is not really following an ideology, listening to a party. Politics perhaps is also a game of chess. Politics, you have to act at that particular moment. So if you know that in time, it will go. So we, now the whole citizenship, I thank for recalling all these laws in this book, what's in. Now they stand resolved. The problem of citizenship stands resolved. They are all citizens of Sri Lanka. Only people are they only get their identity cards. Nowadays it is a question of development, it's a question of equality. And we have clearly declared that we are a non-territorial community. We are a non-territorial straight from Mathule to Mathula. Sometimes in large numbers, sometimes in smaller numbers. But non-territorial nation is a non-territorial nation with all the necessary identity that goes with it. And we have the arts, the culture, the religion, the education. Today, out of that bondage, the people are coming out. This year, I think, this way, last year, I think 700 students were admitted to the universities. This year, we are expecting more. And the number of schools are gone. Well, there's a huge shortage, there's no doubt. There's a huge shortage, but it has gone up. And there has been social differentiation. New classes have appeared. There have been some large number of three-wheel drivers running, flying up and down here. There are some small shop owners, there are large people, other people that come up. That differentiation has taken place, social differentiation. Like all other groups and communities, they become equal. They become equal to others. We are one of the 4 large communities in this country. Indian Tamils form one of the 4 large communities. So as 4 large communities, we are entitled to, so of course, all people are entitled to human rights. But the 4 communities are entitled to power sharing. This power sharing must be done. I remember talking, not as Prime Minister, not as Mr. Deshwar, when he was preparing a report on the Electoral Commission report. I said, this, even some people are arguing, the present proportional representation is much better than earlier, what was earlier. Therefore, we must have proportional representation. I told him, this is not correct. That you must have a system whereby you ensure minority representation. If you have I will just give the example of one district, Valanda. I said take two, if you are going to introduce electorates and proportional representation, take 2 electorates, combine them together, and then make it a 3-member electorate. What is wrong if you have one movement? You can have in parliament, you can have 220 or 230. There are other parliaments which is there. So you develop a system of that nature. You ensure, as you yourself have said, minority representation is not ensured. So to ensure representation, you must study carefully and have proper. I said, I have already finished my thing. Thank you. So, anyway, this, as I, thank you very much for listening to me. And I think we have been, it was beautiful. I thank Mr. Gautam for giving me the opportunity to exchange my views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Again, whenever we speak with Mr. Devraj, it's always very instructive. And when I had the first conversations around, this Malayagam 200, his refrain was, and we take that very seriously, was, that this is not another construction of grievance narrative exercise. That's not, the way we kind of, approach this, or the way achievements have been made, there are various different manners in which, you achieve things. So he has always, constantly reminded us of the path that should not be taken. While, opening up or letting us, take different paths, he also kind of, cautions us on paths that are, that may have certain pitfalls. So, we are very grateful for his wise counsel often as, being. But of course, we do have differences, as you rightly, listen to, he does prefer to mention Indian Tamils, and we this group, we refuse to call ourselves, that we always want to, we want to assert ourselves as Malayaga Tamils, and that's a running conversation, but we do kind of, have a great respect. But now I think, for the final and the most important part of today's proceedings, which is, to hear from the authors. And Rajan. Before I invite them, I think people have to buy the book. It's available, so please do kind of buy the book. It is at home, but nevertheless it's important. I'm not going to read out the full blurb. So the whole introduction to Dr. Hool and Kirbai Mallar Hool is here. So if you want to know more about them, you need to buy the book. But let me kind of say, you all are very aware of Dr. Rajan Hool's contribution. I first came across his name obviously from the seminal work, the Broken Palmyra, and since then I have read quite a lot of what he has written, various reports as well as the books. So I'm an admirer of his, so I'm really grateful to get the opportunity to invite him, and before that invite Kirbai Mallar Hool to make a presentation.
I am only giving an introduction to Rajan Hool's talk. Malayagam 200. We are grateful to the organizers of Malayagam 200 for inviting us to speak at this event. A natural question for people to ask is, what does the book say about today's impasse? It is a book about the recent past with an eye to the future. It is for people who feel that they have a responsibility for our planet. When the majority agrees to penalize those without power, who will be left to save the majority in their trial? The culture of impunity and the menacing secrecy it enforced came to the fore in the recent Easter calamity. The fact that two senior police officers were blatantly hauled up by those in power for trying to expose it shows that we are blindly sitting on a live powder keg. The deceit of the powerful remains the same as at independence. But today, there is no local power in place to check it. Any attempt must begin with the past. The denial of citizenship to the immigrant population robbed us of our judgment and fair play. It created a section whose labor the country parasitically lived on. It perverted the law and corrupted the economic process. That led to the political violence against scapegoats, ethnicization of our discourse, and wasted the potential of 2 generations of youth. The book traces the political opportunism and callousness of our political elite, which led to their failure of nation building and inevitably a culture of impunity. Thank you.
I thank the Malayalam 200 for having invited us here, and also must thank the speakers before me. And one that struck me was the last speaker who said that I'm not in a position to contest what he said, but being in an exploited class, they look at anything positive coming their way differently. But I think we must look for the idea for equality as we have been taught to accept it. I will, in my speech, touch on a slightly different theme. But for a start, that is alienness within walking distance. Citizenship was not originally a contested area. At the first session of the Ceylon National Congress on 11th December 1919, where Sir Purnamalam Arunachalam was elected president, it was assumed without dissent that all communities in the island would be represented. In 1927, the Donamo Commissioners who proposed universal adult franchise for ordinary residents did not themselves envisage a distinction, but it was clear to the Sinhalese plutocrats that under the scheme of one man, one vote, the balance of power would shift to the labouring classes. In 1928, W.A.D. Silva, President of the Ceylon National Congress, wanted the most vulnerable plantation Tamils denied the vote because, quote, their highly deprived living conditions and isolation made their vote a danger to the community, unquote. Any outsider visiting them was legally an intruder and subject to prosecution. Asked by the Indian journalist Sarnia Singh, why not remove the restrictive regime in the plantations, including his own, and allow the labor freedom to mix freely? De Silva admitted that then the chief reason for denying them the vote would be gone. Seeing such specious denial, of the vote made universal franchise farcical. The British administration settled for minimum 5 years residence as a condition for the vote. Proof of 5 years residence seemed reasonable in 1929, and the plantation Tamils to exercise the franchise in the 1931 and 1936 elections, but were by 20 years of insult and administrative harassment based on small-minded technicalities rendered voteless in 1949. In 1941, the legal secretary had told the council that 80% of the plantation Tamils were either born here or had resided more than 10 years. Any government with a meager sense of justice would in 1948 have taken the 5 years residence for granted. But even though they were paupers at the backbone of the economy, they were denied citizenship and the vote, making them slaves on the risible pretext that they were, as D.S. and I could put it, citizens of India. The Labour was totally unprepared for the challenges of contesting disenfranchisement in the courts by proof of 5 years residence, even when many judges were sympathetic. The registration bill of 1941 aimed at the plantation Tamils showed sympathy to the British favour for the transfer of power, with the left opposition safely behind bars, established a stranglehold over the house. Amazingly, with the left behind bars, no Sinhalese voted against the bill. When the independence bill was put to the State Council in 1945, no Ceylon Tamil was willing to face up to the tragedy in train. In the process, we destroyed the trust and good neighborliness within the country to the point of driving the Tamil minority to seek lethal weapons. And in the unfolding dynamic, the majority and minority sought to overcome internal dissent by terror. In today's reality, this was defending the unaffordable army, doubling up as archaeological experts, scouring the northeast for tokens that could be turned into grandiose monuments for the Sinhalese among non-Sinhalese, and in turn driving the starving Sinhalese to desperate measures. Academic historians and archaeologists have, from their dull enclaves, been shot into stardom as their professions became politicized. To prove that Indian laborers came only for a short stay, Professor S.U. Kodikara argued from the comparatively low proportion of unemployable elderly persons on the estates in the 20th century, early 20th century, that the elderly generally returned to India. But in truth, conditions were harsh and the relative death rate very high, so that few survived to return. The blackout of Indian labor's crucial contribution, which kept the economy afloat during the Second World War and long after, to the tune of 65% of our foreign earnings until 1965, is an injustice committed shifted further north to the inspiration from Amaravati of the 3rd century. This necessitates suppression of an episode of Indian Tamil immigration in the 8th to 10th centuries that led to excellence in art, expansion of trade, identification and internationalization of the port of Trincomalee, and the coming of China by invitation. And that is something we must take note of. Movement between Lanka and India was there all along, be it in religion, trade, war or peace. The US scholar D.K. Dwanian, however, points out in his paper Sinhalese sculptures. The political need for the citizenship that therefore inserted an official culture of systematic falsehood. And that is something that we are still to get over. D.K. Duvania, however, points out in his paper, Sinhalese sculptures in the Pallava style in the archives of Asian art, Duke University Press. Quote, Lanka's awareness of Indian neighbors was never so dynamic than during the nearly 400 years following the flight of the Sinhalese prince Manavama to political asylum in Pallava Kanchi to the court of Narasimhavarman I. In 684 AD, he captured the throne of Lanka in the wake of naval aid from the Pallava monarch, which set off from Mamallapuram. Quote, both the stability and prestige of the government of Lanka were related to the unbroken alliance with the Pallavas that lasted until the extinction of the Pallava dynasty near the end of the 9th century. During this time, the kingdom of Lanka benefited from the might of the Pallavas, who in the late 7th or 8th century AD turned Trincomalee into a thriving port city, judging by its wealth from the seabed ruins of Koneswaram temple and Mahayana Buddhist remains all over. The relevant history of Tamil Nadu, the inspiration of Buddhism and Jainism. Tamil Nadu has a blank in its history after the 3rd century AD, up to about 550 AD. Nilakanta Shastri tells us in his history of South India, quote, this dark period marked by the ascendancy of Buddhism and probably also of Jainism was characterized by great literary activity in Tamil, unquote. Though characterizing it the dark period, being the great historian he was, Shastri followed with the brighter side of what has been termed the Kalabra era, a time that saw the golden age of Tamil literature. It was a period marked by pluralism, if not secularism. David Shulman is a citizen of Israel who worked actively for justice to the Palestinians, from whom we in the University of Jaffna were privileged to have a visit. In his book of 2016, Tamil, a biography, provides a solution to the Kalabra riddle that avoids the fantastic. The once prevalent notion of a dark interregnum in which the mysterious dynasty of the Kalabras penetrated with devastating effect into the Tamil country now seems rather exaggerated, if not indeed entirely fictive, unquote. The Kalabra period had witnessed a social upheaval in which the Buddhists and Jains gained in economic importance. In dealing with a revolution which was largely pacific, the Pallavas, the emergent power in the Chola country from 550 AD on, whose rulers in turn embraced Jainism and Hinduism, wisely chose to buy into the revolution rather than suppress it. Thus, the Pallava capital, Kanchipuram, became the city of Jain, Theravada, and Mahayana Buddhist learning. The merchant marine, in the time with Kanchipuram as headquarters, carried Mahayana Buddhism to the Tamil language to East Asia. The social atmosphere of that time is captured in Silappaliyam and Manimalade and in Annie Monius's book, Imagining a Place for Buddhism. Amanavati of Pallava. Senrat Karnavitan, the doyen of Ceylon's archaeologist, in his Art of Ancient Sinhalese 1971, advances the overwhelming influence of Andhra art on the art of early Ceylon, and a branch of their school in Ceylon producing the sculptures on the frontispieces of ancient stupas. This was speculated given the censorship of Mahayana in the chronicles of Ceylon and the 400 years that separated Amaravati from the flowering of Pallava art. Neelakanta Shastri traces Roman influence in the vigorous and subtle realism characteristic of all Indian sculpture, particularly from the days of Asoka and Sanchi to the Pallava sculptures of Mahamallapura. Roman influence in the art of Amaravati foreshadows that of Aihole and Mahamallapura. Unquote. Osman Bhupiarachi from Sorbonne, one of our eminent archaeologists, has pointed to the mass discoveries in the 7th and 8th centuries of statues of Bodhisattva, Avalokite Ishvara, the protector of sailors, along the island's ports, rivers and overland roads. He also points to the famous Mahayana Buddhist statues in the southeast of the island, as in Buzurgala, from this period, but he remarkably fails to make the crucial Pallava connection and leaves these facts as curiosities hanging in the air. The Amaravati claim is focused on one instance. Padnavitana quoted the authority of Ananda Kumarasamy on the well-known statue in the Abhayagiri grounds in Anuradhapura. Dignified as are the Buddhist statues of Amaravati, the great Buddha at Anuradhapura surpasses them in grandeur. But Rohanian's case on the actual origin of the statue and its date to 8th century AD went unanswered. All the while, local archaeological publications have tried to protect the state's ideological positions on the east of the country, particularly Trincomalee. The east of Pallava Lake. It is reasonable to assume that the Pallavas in sending forces into Lanka saw the utility of the east coast to expand their trade activities. It opens the likelihood that Spatana porters in Ptolemy's map represented Thiriai rather than Trincomalee proper. Neelakanta Shastri records that Pallava Narasimhavarman's son and successor Narasimhavarman II Rajasimha during his reign 700 to 728 AD, marked by peace and prosperity, sent embassies to China and maritime trade flourished greatly in his time. Unquote. We may take this as the time Trincomalee was open to international shipping from China to the Arabian Peninsula, permitting the spread of the contemporary message of Islam to the Far East. The time agrees with the appeal to Konetsaram by the 9th century lyricist Tirunjana Sambandar. Once more we refer to David Schulman's Tamil's biography. Quote, prehistory proceeds into proto-history and from there to the historical light of day. To return briefly to the problem of dating, once again we find ourselves working backwards on the 8th century record, converging on some legendary figures who might easily be situated together with some other heroes from the mythic past. I think we can conclude that this wave of consolidated tradition constitutes something good and true, not in the sense of brute historical facts, but in the sense that the Tamil literary tradition achieved a certain semi-standardized form at the time in Pandya Madurai of 5th to 8th century. The history in the Mahavansa we listen followed Shulman's formula. We know that Tamil Buddhist monks who wrote or presided over the writing of the Mahavansa and Buddhadasa Deva in 5th century and Kulavamsa Dhammakirti, Mahathera, 13th century, were undoubtedly familiar with history writing in the Pandya country. Manavama Singh, Muruga riding on the peacock at Gokarna, belongs to this category of history. This is from the Buddha Vamsa. The peacock is fictitious, but it points to the location of meditation, Gokarna as near Kataragama. On Trincomalee, further evidence is related by Tijana Radeska in the Vintage News, September 2016. Quote, Arthur C. Clarke uncovered ruined masonry, architecture and idol images of the sunken original temple, including carved columns with flower insignias and stones in the form of elephant heads. Spread down the shadows surrounding seabed. The pillar as well as ruins display Tamil, Pallava and Chola influence of the 3rd to 9th century era, corroborated by the discovery of Pallava Grantha and Chola script inscriptions and Hindu images found in the premises. Unquote. See Nandagopal of the University of Pennsylvania adds, quote, as the emblem of power and imperial status, elephants are given a significant place in the Pallava royal regalia and occupy the sacred precinct of temple architecture. Until the Pallava intrusion of the 7th century, Trincomalee was hardly noticed. C.W. Nicholas in the special issue of the Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society Ceylon branch of 1963, referring to Ptolemy's celebrated map of AD 150, confirms the obscurity of Trincomalee. The river Ganges is the Mahavir Ganga. It is extraordinary that no boat is marked at its mouth, and the great harbour of Trincomalee had no name. In the chronicles, the port of Trincomalee is called Gokarnatita or Gonagamaka. It is mentioned as a landing place in the 5th century BC, although this account is probably legendary. And again in the 3rd century, the letter to the newly elected Gokarna Vihara in Trincomalee, gaining precedence over Bhubaneswaran temple, supposedly destroyed in the 3rd century. The foregoing might also answer another question, the origin of the Kataragama Muruga shrine, latterly supported by the kings of Kandy and patronized by Tamil speakers. The best introduction to this question is given by Sir Ponnambalam Arunachalam in his essay, The Worship of Muruga or Skanda. This may be termed the ancient religion of Ceylon, enriched by a steady stream of Indian immigrants and pilgrims from prehistoric times. We observe that the Pallavas came by the east coast. What this suggests to us is that before Mahayana expanded in Tamil Nadu about 4th century AD, its sailors were worshippers of Muruga. Thus Mahayana shrines followed Muruga shrines in tandem along the east coast. Hence the Mahayana shrines in the south, including Mudurugala. Hence the Mahayana shrines in the south, including Mudurugala, in the same area as Kavirama. Pilgrims from the north to Kavirama too have followed on foot the coastal road from the north. Muruga's power over the Sinhalese too should not be underestimated. Just funny. We are left with a picture of continuous immigration from India. E.B. Denham, writing in the Ceylon census of 1911, says of another festival. It is now regarded as a very sacred occurrence by the Catholics of Ceylon and even of southern India. But they are not the only people who form the vast crowd each year during the month of July, convert the quiet little village of Talavillu into a large bustling town, improvised with huts made of logs and peasants. Mohammedans, Gentiles, individuals of all shades of religious opinion flocked hither as to a large fair. Yes, with a through connection with India, Mena may once again enjoy the prosperity which has been graphically described by many writers untold. But alas, that prosperity has evaded us. And lastly, we know that Koneశ్వరం rose as a port of international fame only when there was peace with Lanka, peace within Lanka, and peace between China, India and Lanka. But our Indian labor came here on the basis of solemn promises. We acted like a superpower in the way we treated them. Thank you.
Kalana was listening intently because an email address with us. He did share with me the diligent, being very diligent. He did share with me, and I did promise that we will ensure that a soft copy of it will be emailed to everyone who comes and gives their email address to us. You could leave your email address out and we will send it. Now I would like to. We are running late, obviously. I would like to take another 30 minutes of your time, if all of you are agreeable, to open up for discussion and comments. Just would like to ensure, or just would like to invite people who would want to make an observation to raise your hand. I will probably take, call 3 in threes to make a comment or an observation. And I kindly request, given that many people may want to make comments in our limited time, I would kindly request people who are making a comment or asking a question from the panel to be brief and to the point. Having said that, I now open out to whoever who wants to make. I do have a prior request. As people settle down, anyone who would want to make a comment or a question?
I am Prabhat De Silva. I would like to make a few remarks. When we are speaking of the British period, one aspect is very often neglected, and we don't pay much attention to it. That is how the contemporary social movements in Britain influenced their policies in the respective colonies. For instance, one speaker made reference to the Colebrook-Cameron Commission. Now, Cameron was a Benthamite, and he was a utilitarianist. He was a pupil of Benthamite, and utilitarianism influenced his thinking. And then it's a watershed in British colonial rule. It opened up. It was a very progressive report. And similarly, now when we think of the differences, now for instance, that existed, British rule permitted. Due to the British rule, the facilitation from transition, British rule, I would say, facilitated the transition from feudalism to capitalism, which is a progressive thing. And then, when we speak of the emergence of various, elite formations, what we can see is that it's not, we have neglected two things. First, we are speaking of unitary system, unitary form of government, and also the devolution. But one point of view, we would have successfully, maintain a unitary system of government if the country worked in one language. For that, the English would have been the most, would have been the common language, and we should have opened the doors for our children to, have vast knowledge.
Okay.
Right? Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm just mindful of time, and and some other people also wanting to either comment or ask questions from the panelists. Who have any questions to be asked? Yes, go ahead.
I just
One second, we'll get the mic.
I just had a quick question following, in some sense, what Kirumale who said that this was a look at the past with an eye to the future. And it seems like one of the questions that raises, or what the book raises, is what in some sense the country owes hill country Tamils. And so, and particularly perhaps suggested also by Raghu's comments, questions of reparations. So I want to just ask anyone on the panel with their thoughts about reparations, what form it might take. There's affirmative action, land grants, other kinds of ways in which the injustices could be redressed.
Thanks. May I, before, and I probably will give the last word to the authors, so may I direct the question to Dr. Vamadevan and to Mr. Devraj?
Me?
Yeah.
Any question?
No, in terms of, what does the country owe the community? What do you think about reparations? Am I paraphrasing you correctly? Yeah. And what measures therefore should the state or the government now take?
Present government.
Yeah, going forward. Yeah.
Yes, I can. It's very difficult to.
I also answer you. I also will answer.
I will go and
Yeah, I think if I have understood the question, the reparation or the affirmative action, how that would be done. Because I listed a lot of things that has to be done. Because in terms of like that democracy can enjoyment of the equal rights, a lot of things they are lagging behind. So that has to be picked up. Because now for employment, for instance, I cited, there were 3 people only for the first time. They entered in the Sri Lanka Foreign Service, mainly because of some affirmative thing. There was some ethnic quota at that time. 3 people. That was the first, and thereafter there were no people in the Foreign Service because they have some limitation in their achievements. That's one of the reasons, because you can't compare with others. Still, there are a lot of things have to come up. So those things have to be listed, and that is where some preferences have to be given in certain areas that can be identified. Because there are people working on that. So if that is so, the government can give, particularly these land rights. So that is the book highlights that. So still they don't have, they are not owning a land. For example, they have only 7 purchases of land for housing on. So that also has a lot of problems. But these things, they are all workers. They are resident workers. They can't own a land. So some proposals are being made, and the politicians have given some green lights. So what he says, that has to be implemented. That policy prescription has to be translated into action. So that is how we have to enter that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
One answer to this question is positive discrimination. that there must be a clear admission that this community was treated badly and we are responsible. I think that's what I would suggest. So where they lack schools or jobs, the government must move to give them these lands and jobs and make them better off. And I didn't make myself clear. I think that is why I disagreed with Mr. Devaraj. I think now the CWC needed positive discrimination, but they also cooperated with Jayawardhan. And I think Jayawardhan is one of the worst scoundrels in this country.
And it's maybe my reverse.
Okay.
So actually, I respected reasons for what they did, but and I think we also try to balance it by trying to do some good to the Tamils. But I think that's something that we had to debate about and not give an offhand answer.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Sumati.
I think she had
So, I beg your pardon.
when you
Once again, can you wait the mic?
when you refer to young Tamils, are you referring to just being the country tea Tamil workers? When you refer to Indian Tamils, are you just referring to the upcountry Tamil workers?
Okay, yeah. That's one question, Sumati. You can ask.
Well, to start off with saying that maybe we should popularize Malayalam Tamil because Tamils are not very kind of focus too much on the Tamil part, but the Malayalam because it's more poetic and Aham means home and the interior in Tamil. So maybe that's just one point. And the Hill country sounds very kind of stellar. And almost colonial. The other thing is the future. I think we are in, the times are very bleak. And just as, Mr. Bhamudevan and Dr. Devaraj, they were talking and, and also about this question of reparations and all that, we are in the hole, we are in this economic crisis, and the economic crisis is actually destabilizing all the state structures and all the, all the welfare structures that we have. And just as we are talking about more Malayalam people coming into the university and in administrative services, and we see that there are quite a large numbers of young youth coming into the university today, all over, and in the sciences as well as in the arts, we are dismantling our educational system. And so for me, I don't know how fighting, and we have to fight. That's not what I would say. We have to fight for these measures, these protections. But there is something happening which is beyond our control at this point, unless we fight together on this. And no amount of kind of the people striving to come up in life is going to kind of fix that. If the economy and the entire kind of welfare structure is going to be dismantled. So I hope at least here in this audience, which is kind of the collaborative audience, we have people don't fight for free education for one. They kind of would be alive to how interconnected these things. Citizenship. The upcountry people, many people, they still don't have citizenship. In this real citizenship, right? It's not just about equality, it's about citizenship. And so I think we have to be very alert to this problematic that kind of we are in today. And to Kalana, before that, I just wanted to say something. A few years.
You have to limit your intervention.
Yeah, very quickly, because of the Aragale. A few years ago, Malaya youth, in fact, for one day occupied Golf's Plane, asking for 1,000 rupees. But today, I don't even know. So Aragale is a continuing force. And although Kalana might not feel he's part of the youth, I think I feel I'm part of the youth. I mean, it is a very complex political phenomenon, it's not just something that's here today and gone now for 2 years.
Yeah, so may I request, that there are two questions posed. No, one is about, one is about the Indian Tamils, is it the plantation Tamils that you are referring to, or is it a much broader group? That was the more specific question on the definition aspect of it. And Sumati's question, I guess, is a little bit more broader, rights for Malayalam Tamil, or in the current context, how would that, pan out while other systems are getting dismantled? How would clamoring for rights of one group pan out? Or how do you struggle together, or how do you, make...
I'm not saying struggle. I think we have to struggle for...
Fight it together, fight
for Malayan people's rights. But I don't know what's going to happen if this...
Yeah, I don't know whether the panelists know what's going to happen either, but they will ask. Again, I probably would want to post it to Mr. Vamadevan and Kalanan.
I'm trying to understand the question, but what is the background on which you are making this comment? But I can guess what you are trying to say, because that country is now asking for so many things. Because Malayalam is not separate, they are all involved, I think, in that process. But what I heard, I have been having some informal chat with some people who are involved, but they were all feeling that they are there. But even in that Aragale, these people are not considered.
No, that's not what I meant.
I don't know.
That's not what I meant was that this is a disenfranchised community, and just as they see a moment of opening with social mobility, and particularly where I am from, the university, I see a large number of students who are very hopeful. There's no hope for anyone. And for a very disenfranchised community, today, that hopelessness is, I don't have an answer for that hope, the hope that people are talking about. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't fight for what we do. I think we should fight for the Malayan Tamil. They should fight, we should fight, everybody should fight, just for the Malayan people. I'm not saying they should join forces with others. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about we are in a very critical time where all state structures are...
We recognize that, that is recognized. We are in a very critical, and the state's ability to respond, or the systems crumbling and the university crumbling. So that part is recognized. I think that milieu that all of us are engaged and working.
Yeah.
So therefore,
so it's not a question.
It's not a question. Therefore, is how it. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to intervene on that because I agree with Sumati that it is a question in fact, and the problem in a sense is the frame of the human rights narrative in Sri Lanka. Ethnicized, or its development gains or has sort of had the terrain, and the struggle has been focused on that and not on so much economic and social rights. And at this time we need to reverse that and be focusing much more on economic rights and justice, debt justice, and all of those issues, and not fall into the pattern of ethnicizing everything, because the other, I suppose the other side of the coin that I sort of missed is the externalities. I mean, Sri Lanka is not just an island on its own. There's always been external factors involved in the internal conflict in this country, and we have it right now going on. We are in a space of geopolitical conflict. Debt is part of that. So we really need to sort of challenge the framing of the human rights issues in this dichotomized space of civil and political rights, which plays to the ethnicization game. and go beyond that to looking at economic and incorporating economic rights into the civil and political rights narrative, which I see that the local NGOs and there's a whole international funding system that kind of subordinates economic rights and justice issues.
Yeah, no point taken there. No point taken. Point taken. But what I want to push back there on is that you have people sitting here who have historically kind of not subscribed to that dichotomy. Here we have people who have not privileged civil political in favor of there's land rights, livelihoods, and so that's where this community is coming from, and that's where these people are coming from. In the absence of any other questions or comments, may I kind of make one?
I have another question.
No question. I think one more question. Yes, go ahead.
May I start by congratulating Rajan Pool and Kirpa Pool for a very illuminating book and something which brings to life a whole period in our history. And it was a wonderful book. I really thought very highly of it. My name is Chandrasan. And now I would like to ask Dr. Devaraja one small question. And he is with a very illuminating talk as well. But I was just wondering why you prefer to remain distinct as Indian Tamils and not as Malayalam Tamils. Is it you do not want to identify yourself with the Tamils of the northern and eastern province, or is it that you just want to keep the historic name?
I don't want to give a long answer. The word in the census is Indian Tamil. Indian Tamil, Sri Lanka Tamil. That is the word. That's the wording. So we have no objection to leaving that. That thing is good. Why the distinction between the Sri Lankan Tamils and the Indian Tamils, there were, I can quote children I can speak or Naganathan speech and say, but how, you see the essential request of the northern or Sri Lankan Tamils is for sharing of power on a federal basis, or something like a federal basis. But this is a non-territorial community. The Sri Lanka, the Indian Tamils are not from Markala to Markala, from Nuvelia to Kandy. Sometimes concentrated, sometimes disconcentrated. So, this is not only in Sri Lanka. There are many countries in the world you have this situation. So, we are claiming that we are a non-territorial nation. We are saying that we are not simply nationhood for Sri Lankan Tamils, but we are also saying we are a non-territorial nationality, and therefore, according to the non-territoriality nationality, the rights not regarded. So we are not. There is certainly a relationship between the Sinhala people and the people in general Tamils. There is certainly a relationship between the Sri Lankan Tamils, language, culture, religion. There is a close relationship. Exchange of ideas. Sri Lanka neighbors. We understand. We try to understand the culture of the Sinhala people, and we must understand. So therefore, therefore in that way, a non-territorial community has certain advantages. A non-territorial nation, but we are a nation because we have one identity, one language, one talk, and one educational system. Most of them are Hindus, of course they are Christians. So therefore, there is no problem in thinking that there is a Sri Lankan Tamil and there is an Indian Tamil, no distinction. But experiments have been carried out. People have gone and settled in Vaunia. That never worked, you see. That never worked. So therefore, it is you have to understand that kind of settlement moving. But certainly, the demand of the Sri Lankan Tamils for nationhood, for federalism is an absolutely correct demand. Absolutely correct and reasonable demand. But for sharing of power on a complicated basis, sharing of seats, sharing of local government representation, positions of our representation, this is the demand, like what multi-action. These are the things. But there is absolutely no contradiction between all these things. There's no contradiction.
Thank you. I just want to bring to a close someone's vehicle, CAZ 6445, CAW 6249, both are blocking someone else, so if people can, move that. I would like to bring...
Could I say something?
No, I would like to bring to close the session because we are running late and, I have been informed by the organizers or, people